All right, everyone's been warned. So good morning, everybody. My name is Tina Beliveau, and welcome to our Zoom panel called Why You Should Be Investing in Airbnbs. So just a little bit of backstory on how this came to be, and then I'm going to get into introducing our panelists and right into our content because we have so much valuable information to share over the next hour, give or take. So the sort of genesis for this panel is that we have a tribe of female agents that work together through the network at eXp Realty. So our group of women is called Empower, and the reason for the name Empower is because we are passionate about empowering women in business and real estate, investing, wealth building. So our little group had a meetup at the end of the year and started brainstorming all the different topics that were of interest to us personally. And one theme that came out was the topic of investing in Airbnbs. Several of our members who are on the panel today have expertise in that area, and other members of ours wanted to learn about it. And then as we started planning it, we thought, why not open this up to everybody? So we have an incredible assembly. We had, I think, about 100 people register for this that are all over the country. Some are in real estate, some are not, some are past clients of different members of our panel. So everybody here is welcome and coming from a different place. And we are going to do our best to just share really broad, valuable, useful information that you can take and go implement, or maybe go consult an expert. Or if you're a realtor, this might be something that you can add to your arsenal to support your clients. So that is how we came to be here today. And I am going to introduce our panelists in just a second. But first, I just wanted to encourage all of you who are watching this live to use the chat box. Laura, who is one of our Empower members as well, is helping admin the Zoom and kicking things off. So she'll help if there's any tech difficulties, and she's already chatting here. So I just wanted to say, if you're able to, could you introduce yourself in the chat and just tell us who you are and why you came today, and maybe whether you're in the real estate industry or not, just a little bit of flavor to what caused you to attend. And we're gonna just keep that in mind as we go through the conversation. So with all of that being said, we are going to first introduce our panelists and then kick off with the first one. So our first panelist is Caitlyn Harrison. Do you want to say hi, Caitlyn?
Hi, everybody. So glad you're here.
And we'll do intros as we kind of go through each person. Our second panelist is Diana Pham.
Hello, everyone.
Glad you're here. And our final panelist is Moira Sedgwick.
Hi, so great to see everyone.
So we have so much to cover that we're just going to dive right in here. And again, if anyone wants to introduce themselves in the chat box, you are more than welcome. So kicking off with Caitlyn Harrison, Caitlyn and I go way back as realtor friends. I think it was 2015 that we first crossed paths and worked together for a little while at my real estate firm, the Beliveau Group. She has gone on to build a ton of expertise in not only selling real estate, but in creating her own super cool Airbnb budding empire. And I don't want to give that away. I'm going to have her explain it. And she is also part of our Empower at eXp network. So Caitlyn, can you introduce yourself and just give a little bit more of your backstory? And we're going to just dive right in here.
Awesome. Yeah, so I've actually been in real estate now for 8 years, and I have a family of almost 6. We're expecting a little boy soon. So we've been busy for a long time. And actually, we've wanted to Airbnb for a long time, but just didn't have the property or, well, the space because we had kids to do it in our previous property. So I'm just going to jump right into how we got started. We actually, when we were looking to go into a different home, we were looking specifically for a place that had Airbnb options or any kind of passive income opportunities. And just last year, we found a property in Jarrettsville, Maryland, that has several passive income opportunities, including a basement, which is super easy to turn into an Airbnb. We're renovating a school bus. There's a barn. We're thinking about a tree house, and even Hip Camp, which is similar to Airbnb, but for camping. So we're so excited to get into it that we're like trying to do it all at once. And it is a lot, but we just didn't expect for our basement Airbnb to be paying our mortgage already, which is awesome. And that was our our dream, our goal was just to pay like a third of it, but no, it's paying for all of it so far, which is awesome. Let's see. I think that's it for the getting into
Yeah, I
it.
just want to say you're too humble, but yeah, you just got a couple things going very quickly, in my opinion. When did you settle on the house that you're in now, the property?
It was March of last year, so it's almost been a year.
Yeah, and you stood up the first Airbnb unit within a couple months.
Yeah, it was a little bit later than that because the bus was being worked on by our contractor. And we're like, well, we want to get them both going at the same time. So we had to halt the bus and then start on the basement. So it was a little bit delayed.
Great. Well, in my perception, it seems like it's happened very, very quickly and
Yeah,
very creatively. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about exactly how that's worked out, but kind of just backing up and thinking about, for a lot of the people that are here that haven't ever, done their own Airbnb, maybe they've just stayed in one and they're curious about it. The beginning of the process is like, how do you do that market research? And I know you had shared with me that you were really estimating with this property. You didn't, you weren't sure on the demand. I think you said that you had a goal of $1,000 in monthly income. How does a newbie start to do market research on the Airbnb platform?
Yeah, I think the way we got started was just looking at the Airbnb platform itself and seeing, is there anything in this area? So we kind of tailored where we were looking to buy a house to that, but ultimately we ended up going into this small town, which just we weren't sure necessarily what to expect. That's why we kind of set a goal of $1,000. And I've been shocked to see that people are coming here during the week. People are coming here for the most random reasons. So basically, when we looked on the Airbnb platform, we saw, are there any Airbnbs in our area? How close is it to Baltimore? How close is it to events, wedding venues? We get a lot of people coming for weddings. We actually just had somebody leave. I'm in the Airbnb now because they came for a funeral. So yeah, it was really interesting to dive in and do the research and see that there's only a couple in our area, and they're not trying to, I guess, like stage and do all the things. So people are drawn to ours versus what else is out there. There's low supply, high demand, especially now, and Airbnb is more people are staying in Airbnbs than ever.
So thank you for sharing all of that. And I think it sounds like you were able to do some gauging of demand, but really you had limited data to look at because you're doing something somewhat unique. You had mentioned to me when we were prepping for this that sometimes it can make sense to weigh the value of a long-term lease and what someone might pay monthly rent versus Airbnb. Was that a factor with this property for you, or were you looking at Airbnb only?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were at least looking at, we'll try Airbnb first, and if that goes well, then we'll continue, and if not, then it might be more cost effective to just have it as a long-term lease. But it has far exceeded what we could get for a long-term lease, and we still get to use it.
Beautiful. You also told me about something called smart pricing. Could you explain what that is?
Yeah, especially as an economist, I love when a platform does the data for you and they know what demand is in the area. So the way smart pricing works, and I always recommend that people turn it on, is that you put in a range, and then depending on the demand in your area, they'll set the price to the minimum or the maximum or in between as needed, depending on what the demand is, so that compared to maybe I think actually a neighbor on the same road has an Airbnb. So say if we were doing smart pricing, ours might stick out more than our neighbors and people would be more likely to book.
Could you give just some examples of what's the nightly rate range for your first unit, the one that is up and running right now?
Yeah, typically I see, especially speaking of demand, there are a lot of units that are in the $100 range. It's like the sweet spot, especially for us. It really depends on how many you can sleep, how big your spot is. If you're a whole house versus we're an apartment, but we can sleep 5 people. Our bus might even be more because it's a unique experience, and it actually sleeps 6 or more, which is shocking. So yeah, I think it's interesting, again, to do the market research to see how much people are charging for what type of property it is.
Thank you for explaining that. And one of the comments in the chat box is the smart pricing is a setting you can just turn on in Airbnb. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. And
So
you
you're just
set
trusting the algorithm to figure it out
Yes.
for you a little bit?
Yep. I mean, yeah, as a tech company, the fact that they have an algorithm is great because then it works in your favor.
Perfect. Okay, so that's just like a little bit of a snippet of market research. Obviously, it's a whole project to dive in and figure out, but let's just kind of walk through the process. So you did that piece, you found this property with a lot of potential. What did you do next? Aside from obviously acquiring the property and running the numbers, what happened after that?
I think if anything, especially while I'm showing somebody a property and I'm getting more and more people who are interested in the Airbnb spot option, especially since prices are higher. Really what we'll do is I'll go into the space and see, is there everything that you need here that is, I guess, cheap enough to turn into something like we had a basement with a bathroom, but not a kitchen, but it's easy to switch that into having a kitchen because the plumbing is right there. So there's questions sometimes that people have about, will this space even work? So first you want to start with those basics, but then it was fun to figure out the space planning. How can we make this really function as an Airbnb? And we get comments all the time on how spacious it is, but really we had a square to work with. It was kind of awkward. And it is really important to think about the flow. I used to be a wedding planner, so even thinking about just the flow of things and how big of a table can you get in here? Should you go with a bigger table versus a smaller table or couch? You just want to maximize the function of the space.
I'll just cut in because one thing that you educated me on, which seemed so obvious once you told me, was like hotel style. Behind you, you can see there's two, like, so instead of one king bed, you have two double beds or full size beds, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're two queen beds. And I almost was going to put a partition or walls, but I wasn't really sure if people would want privacy. But we haven't had an issue with booking, 2 people, 4 people most of the time. Sometimes 5 people, or with somebody with, or a family with a baby or something like that. But I'm glad we didn't have to. In fact, those are fence panels that are on the that are cut in half as the headboards. I was going to use those as like dividers as well if it was needed. So at least it was there, but we haven't had any problem booking or anybody thinking that there's a privacy issue. So yeah, that went into the space planning as well.
So that's sort of like the nuts and bolts of like how to optimize the space itself to fit enough people and have that like great experience in the setup. What about the actual like design, the aesthetics? Because I know that has been one of the reasons you've had so much early success with, I mean, you've booked out. I don't know if you've sold out, but come very close to it. I don't really know actually what the Airbnb like term is for that, but if you could touch on that too, like what does that look like defining success?
Yeah, I think I can actually show the occupancy rate up here, but we've been in the 70s and 80s quite a lot when we just thought we would book the weekends. So yeah, the design I think is the thing that makes people stand apart, because anybody could create an Airbnb and it could be mismatched and not cute at all, and it's still comfortable and feels like home, but there's just an edge that you can get when you have the design aspect. I've even seen Superhosts that are and they have great experiences and all, but it just elevates the experience to a whole other level when you have the design and when you have things like snacks. And I think it's over there, yeah, a welcome tray with chocolates and water. But yeah, I think the more people are finding out about Airbnb, the more that they're the experience is becoming elevated. So people are expecting more and more.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny, you do a really nice job of marketing your Airbnb on your Instagram, and I've just enjoyed following the journey as a fellow, real estate agent, and also someone who's interested in creating memorable experiences for people, which seems to really be the theme. And we're going to hear a lot more about that with another panelist in a few minutes. But I've seen that like when people leave feedback, they often mention that when they arrive to your Airbnb that you've left out snacks and that there's nice music playing. I've seen that repeatedly in your posts. So I find that really interesting that that's what stands out to people, is the way you make them feel.
Yeah, it really is. And it reminds me so much of real estate. Like when you're staging for a listing, the whole goal is to create that emotional attachment so that they can't not put an offer on the house. So it's kind of similar in this way that they talk about it with their friends, and yeah, it's just way different than a place that's just put together. In fact, I ended up having a bunch of my staging inventory that I used for this, so I didn't even spend a ton of money on the staging stuff.
Yeah, there's so
What-
many ways to like creatively pull these things together as long as you look for the cost savings. But let's talk about the aesthetics a little bit, like more specifically. I know that you had a vision of what it should look like. So can you talk about what you sought out? And I'm actually going to drop the link to this unit in the chat box so people can look at it later and actually see all the photos. But can you share a little bit about the thought process for that?
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the themes that people love nowadays is Joanna Gaines and the Magnolia Network and the farmhouse vibe. So that's the vibe we were going with, and it's not necessarily my vibe, but because we're surrounded by farmland, because it's so popular, I think people will come in. I even have the book Magnolia Story and Magnolia. I created a theme basically around Magnolia, and that just again made it. Somebody even said, they said, I've been to the silos in Texas, and this is just as good as Chip and Joe's stuff. So just the fact that people are attracted to, they want an experience that's almost outside of home. And so I wanted to create a vibe that kind of fit our area. Like in Baltimore, I feel like the eclectic modern is more popular, but here it's very farmhousey.
So smart. So did you basically just get visual inspiration from places? Did you buy a bunch of Magnolia products? Like, just how'd you do it?
Well, I'll say that in my staging inventory, that was also the vibe I was doing for a lot of listings in my area. So a lot of the stuff I ended up having, like a lot of greenery, a lot of matte black, and wood framed things, and yeah, just farmhousey vibe. I mean, in general, but it's like elevated, like a luxury modern farmhouse.
I love it. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the like extras that you've done to create the experience. These are little things that have a huge impact. So the first thing you shared with me was making things duplicatable that are going to be sort of a theme through all of the units that you have, even if they look different. Can you give some examples of that?
Yeah, one of the most basic actually is starting with the bedding. The bedding is white. It's easier to clean. You can bleach it. You can get the same kind of stuff. In fact, the bedding is textured so that even if it ends up getting a little wrinkly, you wouldn't notice it. So it's not something I have to upkeep, but it's comfortable. And I've had so many people comment on how comfortable the beds are. And I keep it cozy with the blankets across and throw pillows. But the other one is, instead of spending a lot of money on the mattress itself, I have a mattress topper, and people are always asking, where did you get your mattress from? It's like, well, it's only like $100 mattress topper. And people said that was the best night's sleep I've ever had, which is shocking to me. And I get people asking about that all the time. Let me think if there's anything else. But really, and
We
lots of
touched a
throw
little
pillows.
bit on like the music playing, but like what are the extras that you have out that you find make people delight people when they arrive?
The music really is a big one. I think it creates this feeling, and then they walk in and there's the music, we have the lamps turned on, we have the chocolate in the water, and then they don't even know that there's a little snack area, and I have menus for local areas for restaurants, because we're in a very small town and there's really not too many places to go eat. But it's just those little touches apparently go a really long way, and it's not even that hard, and it's not that difficult to restock. I would say you don't want to go too far above and beyond, because it's a lot to keep up with, restocking so many different things. But coffee, snacks, chocolate, and water, and I keep soda in there as well in the refrigerator.
I love it. So yeah, it's like that tightrope balance of like creating the experience, but not burdening yourself with so much upkeep and just the restock cost of many different things. So it's like figuring out your high impact, like the mattress topper versus every piece of furniture being, super expensive. So all of what you're talking about can lead up to creating this experience that would lead to you being ranked as a superhost. So can you explain what a superhost is, what it takes to become one, and then what the benefits are to you as the investor?
Yeah, becoming a super host is what everybody tries to do, especially at first. And what they do is they do quarterly reviews. So you have to wait for a little while before you can become a super host, and you have to have a 4.8 star review across the board or better. You have to have 90% response rate and at least 10 stays within that period, and a less than a 1% cancellation rate. So becoming the super host is just helpful because people often look for that badge. They are more likely to book with somebody who is a super host, and they go right down to the reviews anyway to see what the experience might be like. And yeah, the algorithm just likes it better too. So they're going to make me show up above other people who aren't. We actually have a friend who, she's going to be watching this later, or she might be right now, who just opened up her Airbnb like 20 minutes away from us. And there's a referral fee for a higher referral fee for when you refer out another host. So there are a lot of benefits for becoming a super host. It's just better all around.
Yeah. So what's interesting is just like any good business model, it all works together, right? Where you create the experience, you run the business well, you respond to your inquiries, you get the higher booking rates. Again, it sounded like 70 to 80% nights per month is a very strong number. And then all of that leads to the Superhost experience, and it builds on itself. So it's really delivering that quality and value over and over again, turning it into a system.
You want me to mention arbitrage?
I do, yeah. So because that, when you're kind of at this level of being like a more credible Airbnb operator, it sounds like the arbitrage opportunity makes a lot more sense to be able to pursue. So talk about that.
Yeah, so when you become a super host for one property, it is easier to leverage yourself to landlords who are open to the idea of having an Airbnb on their property, and it's better than long-term renters for a variety of reasons. And if you can have a landlord agree with that, it's actually a really good way to get into investing without putting up a whole bunch of money to begin with. It's a little bit hard to do, but there is a secret sauce to it, basically. And one of them is starting as a super host with your own property or something like that. So the way arbitrage really works is kind of getting into the Airbnb world without buying a house. You can do it as a renter. You can do it as a renter of a basement. And, you know, it doesn't have to be fancy. And sometimes even you can do it in a place that's a little bit distressed, so that it increases the value of their place anyway, and they're getting good people coming in and out of the Airbnb.
One thing that I think is really just intriguing to me and inspiring about an approach like this, whether this is the exact thing you do or not, is when it comes to buying real estate and investing in real estate, when there's a will, there's a way. And I think it's easy. I mean, I've just seen this being a real estate agent for a long time, where there are these perceptions out there that, a good example, like a common myth that a lot of people seem to think is that you need 20% down as a down payment to buy a property. A lot of people realize that isn't the case, but I still come across people who are like, I need 20%, right? And I'm like, well, no, if you're a veteran, you can do 0 down. There's FHA. But to kind of like take that and like move that example to the real estate investing space, I think it can be intimidating. It can seem overwhelming. You don't know where to start, but there are ways to get your foot in the door. So if you really want to do something like this, arbitrage might be a way to do it. There might be a way to arrange private money. So I guess I just point all of that out because I think real estate it's not an easy thing to do all the time, but it's a simple way to build wealth if you have a plan and can really work your way towards it. So I just kind of say that as encouragement to anybody who, even if you're sitting here and feeling like, how could I ever do all this? I may not have all the expertise. There's probably like a piece where you can start. And it might even just be, buying the next house and turning the house that you live in now into a rental. So I just kind of want to like throw that little encouragement and inspiration on top. And then to kind of like take that from there to the tactical piece, Caitlyn, are you open to sharing what your numbers have been like as far as income on this first unit, even just like in a general way?
Yeah. you can actually see insights within the app, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to share my screen in a minute, that it shows like a bar graph of how much you're making each month, and it also shows your occupancy rate. It shows your how much you're getting for cleaning fees, so you can budget your management company or cleaning company based on the cleaning fees that you're getting. You might need to increase them. So it's really helpful to see all of that data right there. And let me see if I can share it, because it's helpful to see. It's actually really encouraging to see this on a daily basis to see if we're hitting our goals. So I'm going to share really quickly.
Thank you. And thanks for being transparent. I think it just helps to see like what does all of this actually translate to?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do like to be really transparent, because it's helpful to see what the actual reality is. So here it is with what we earned last year. We opened the Airbnb in the beginning of September, and we still almost made it to 2,000 that month. And then October was amazing. There was a good bit of weddings actually that were close by. And then to be totally transparent, our mortgage is almost $2,500 a month. So the goal was to get to 1,000. So we surpassed that, and to see basically once you average it out, that 9,700, that was still above our mortgage payment. And then here we are in January, made above the mortgage payment. And January and February are a little bit, I anticipated that they would be a little bit slow, but because Annie, who did say that she's watching, because she started her Airbnb, that jumped up $500 just for the referral of her starting
Wow.
her Airbnb. So again, we're still on track. And then our bus is going to open up this month, and hopefully that'll double our monthly. And so
that's incredible. And it's so nice that you can see your pipeline of expected income. And
yes.
Yeah, somebody asked in the chat box if this is gross or net. Are those numbers before Airbnb takes any fees out?
No, this is after. So this is what we've actually been paid out. So
okay, yeah, hence the word paid out on the screen. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, does it? Oh yeah, I see.
I just didn't look at it yet.
Yeah, that's okay. And then down here it'll have the details. Right now in February we're at 24%. For 2022 it says we're at 24%. And nightly price, cleaning fees for the whole year. So, but once you click on one bar, it'll show you. See, I usually do this on the app, so hopefully. Oh, on the app you can click on January and it'll show you just January's.
Great.
Transaction history, all of that. So this is just a really great platform. I've really loved it, and they only take 3% out, I believe, which is so tiny when you think about each experience. So it's been worth it. In fact, we're even at the point where we might raise the price, at least on the weekends, because we book weekends really quickly.
Wow. Okay. Well, one last question for you, and then we're going to hop to our next panelist. So what's next for you? Somebody actually was asking in the chat box about the bus. Can you just tell a little bit more about that, and maybe where people could follow the journey of the bus?
Yeah. So actually we bought a school bus to renovate when we were going to sell our house, because we weren't sure if we were going to find another house. Well, it's a good thing that we did find another house, because the bus took a long time to be finished, and materials costs increase and things like that. But it's a legitimate full-size school bus, and it's going to sleep 6 people, and we have 2 acres, and it's surrounded by farmland, so we're going to put it back in the wooded area of our property, so that creates like a camping type experience, but in a luxury way. So if you follow my Instagram at Happy and Home Co, at Happy, and I don't have to spell anything. It is.
I'll put it in the chat box for you too. Yeah.
I'm kind of detailing our story a lot recently, since it's so close to being launched, and it might be soon that we create its own handle for our Airbnbs, but we're getting more and more content, which is great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And we've had a lot of action in the chat box with more questions. So I just want to reiterate to everybody, Laura's tracking the questions. We're going to come back to some of them. Some of them are actually going to be answered in the next couple sections. So thank you, Caitlyn. We'll be coming back to you later for Q&A.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so next up we have Diana Pham. So just a little bit of backstory. Diana and I have worked together since she became a realtor about 4 years ago. She is a self-professed house nerd, which also plays into her Instagram handle. She loves charming historic properties. She also has insane do-it-yourself chops. She has done so much work improving her own historic home in Baltimore City. So in addition to selling a heck of a lot of real estate since getting into this industry, she's also become an expert in the investment real estate space. She has her own property management company, and she has helped some Airbnb investors get their properties up and running. So with all of that said, welcome, Diana.
Hi, well, thank you. Happy to be here today. I was gonna welcome myself.
Well, I was gonna say, it's always my mission to embarrass you a little bit, so I think I did that. So could you kick off by maybe just giving like a tiny bit more of like your professional backstory and how that springboarded into this Airbnb world that you're now working in?
Sure. Yeah. So, as Tina said, I am a real estate agent, and I've been working with Tina from the start. And, in terms of my involvement in, short-term rentals, property management, and all of that, it really happened organically. Obviously, as being a real estate agent, we have clients that come to us and, they're looking for opportunities like this. And I feel like over the last few years, it's just been increasing. We're seeing more and more people that are interested in this as a stream of income. So, when we have clients that are coming to us for this, it's something that we've got to become really well educated in and make sure that we can, serve our clients to a high standard. So it's something that, came, organically out of, the people that were coming to us for services. In terms of property management and all of that, again, happened for me organically. Had friends who had properties who, had bad experiences with other property managers, and, like, well, you're in the field of real estate, how can you help? And so really just got into it that way. We also have, our own, rental. It's a family property. It was, a family member's primary residence for a long period of time. And we've since transitioned that into a short-term rental as well. So again, it's just kind of been, organically growing over the years, both through clients coming to us on the team and, the services that we offer, and my involvement as well.
Lovely. Okay, so there's so much that you could talk about, but part of what I was thinking as far as sort of helping people crystallize this, I feel like my mission with starting off with Caitlyn was to kind of show the vision of like a lot of creativity and the different way things can work, but getting a little bit more into the nuts and bolts, the real estate agent part of things is how to help somebody, actually acquire the right property in the right location at the right price. So let's just kind of start at the beginning. Somebody comes to you, they want to make an investment. What are the key steps of the process at a high level that you walk them through to make this decision effectively?
Yeah. So I think the first and foremost, the thing that I focus on the most when someone comes to us and they're interested in this is really just, spend a lot of time delving into why. Like, why do they want to do this? Why do they think that this is something that fits with their life? I don't know about everyone else, but I feel like in my experience, a lot of people, that have been interested in this, they kind of underestimate it a little bit in terms of, what is the level of work that this entails. It seems like, there's a lot of TV shows on this, just like there has been for flipping houses. So it has brought a lot more attention to short-term rentals, and it's a fantastic, opportunity for a stream of income. But it's really just making sure that people understand it. So it's really getting into why do they want to do this? What type of property do they envision themselves owning? Because there is, there's a style, there's a creative aspect to this, not just the investment side of it. So what do they envision? Is this a property that they're going to be using for themselves? Is it like a vacation home that they're also going to be staying in? Because part of how they envision using it and what their involvement is going to be is going to, we have to play by rules and regulations within, where that Airbnb is going to be located. So we need to take that into account. So, why do they want to do it? What's their involvement? Are they really thinking about all of the costs? So giving them education in terms of, what's the upfront look like for a short-term rental, because it's very different from, a long-term rental, because, you got to furnish the entire place and make it comfortable and all of that. So there's a higher upfront investment. So making sure that people are thinking through that, and also walking through, what is the big picture? What's the long-term picture? Are they planning on managing the property themselves, or are they looking to leverage someone else who has experience in this, and have them take care of everything, so it's a little bit more passive for them as opposed to them being actively involved on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's really like the front end of what I walk people through, is just making sure that they fully understand what a short-term rental looks like, how it is going to fit into their life, what kind of property, and making sure that they're really educated before we kind of delve into looking at houses and all of that.
Yeah, I love that you pointed out the why, because I think this can sound like really exciting and the creativity, and then it's like the real work, the management. So having a clear understanding, or even how often you might want to use it and how that impacts income. So just kind of reflecting back, there's a lot of facets to what you just downloaded quickly. To talk like a little bit about like some of the nuts and bolts as far as like the numbers, is there anything you want to just add on top of what we already talked about with Caitlyn as far as financing, analyzing the deal, house prices, that kind of piece of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So financing, and I just kind of touched on this a little bit, how people are planning on using the property factors into this, but also, a client's financial picture is going to factor into how they can finance a short-term rental. So let's say someone is planning on, like Caitlyn, renting out a portion of, their home, and they are going to be living there. You're going to be eligible for just like your normal mortgage products, standard, conventional, all of that. You could do FHA. Now, let's say you already have a home that's your, primary residence, and you want to buy another property and have that as an Airbnb. Your number of financing options are going to, lessen a little bit. So you could qualify for second home mortgage, but then you also have to be factoring in whether you're eligible for that. So you can't, like, let's say you live in Baltimore and you have your own home and you want to buy another property in Baltimore, the bank's not going to consider that to be a second home. It has to be, kind of like a vacation. It has to be, the location has to be different. And then you have to factor in how often you're going to be staying there. You can't just buy a second home and never actually take up residence there. So there's, different eligibility for that. But then let's say, you're just buying it as just a pure investment and you're not ever going to stay there yourself, or at least not regularly. Then, again, your financing options will change as well. And, the more that you're not staying there, so second home mortgage or investment type financing, your down payment amount is going to increase. So if it's investment property, it requires a higher down payment. Your mortgage rates are going to increase. So, your monthly payment on that mortgage is going to increase. So you got to think through all of those and factoring in, what your upfront cost is going to be and what your monthly carrying cost is going to be, because that's going to change your calculations of what income you're going to be making. Some other options, you could leverage properties you own, line of credit on a property that you own, cash out refinance, take that money and then put it into a short-term rental investment. So there's different options there to think through, and it's all going to depend on that person's financial situation and what kinds of properties they already own. So you also mentioned market research. So Caitlyn touched on this a little bit, but the other thing that I will do with clients is, if this seems like a good investment for them to make, is to walk through, help them walk through, what is this going to look like from a pricing standpoint? Like, is this a good investment to actually make? What kind of income can I, draw from this type of property? And to do that as a real estate agent, it's a little bit different from, like, there's no MLS, there's no database with all of, the information that's easy to pull from. So, you do have to look across multiple sources. So Airbnb, obviously, Verbo is another one that has a lot of properties on it. And then the other thing is, depending depending on what the location is, looking for comps with local management companies as well. This is a big thing when you're dealing with like vacation properties, because there could be these local companies that, they've been around for generations and people only list their properties with that company and they're not on, Airbnb and Vrbo. So looking there. The information that you're looking at is a little bit different too. I kind of have to get into the like nuts and bolts of properties to really compare them. So it's not just, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, this is the square footage, things like that. You have to really be looking at the details about the property. So, what are the amenities? So Caitlin was touching on this in terms of the niceties, that are offered to clients. You don't want to compare prices for a bare bones, house where the tenant has to bring their linens with them. There's no coffee, like those little things. But then it's big things too, like if it's a vacation place, like do they have access to a lake? Is there dock access, things like that. So you really need to get into comparing apples to apples and looking at what each of these properties actually offers. Caitlin talked a little bit about, rates. So that's something that, really focus on with clients. And, there's the nightly rate, but one thing, on the upfront side, when you're considering making an investment, is also looking at all of the other fees that get tacked on, because there's a nightly rate, but then each property will do different, types of fees. So a pet fee, there's a service fee, the cleaning fee varies, as Caitlin was mentioning. So you have to average all of that information in to factor what what you could be charging to think through whether this particular property is going to yield you income. So looking at all of that, Caitlin talked about other properties in the area and all of that, and that's a part of it too, is looking at the saturation of other units in the area. And just because there aren't any, it doesn't mean that it's not, a viable option. But you want to be thinking about who are your tenants, who's coming here, why are they coming here, what's around that's going to draw them in, if there aren't, other options. And then if it is highly saturated, again, it doesn't mean it's a bad option. But for my clients, it's really thinking through, how are you going to compete? There's this high nightly rate that you might be able to charge, but on the upfront side, if you're going to be competing with other, a lot of other options, you're going to have to typically start with a lower nightly rate and work your way up. So thinking about it from an investment standpoint, can you front, those months where you're getting a lower nightly rate until you can build up a reputation and increase, what you're charging to clients. So yeah, so
I
it's
just
really
have to cut in with one
yeah.
thing. It's like, at the risk of saying something wildly obvious to anyone here who's watching, if you're new to this process, partnering with a real estate agent who really understands this is crucial. And then also having your financing in order. And one thing that I want to jump to before we move on to our final panelist, Diana, is if you could just talk a little bit about what I consider the gotchas of Airbnb investing, like, oh, does this county or HOA allow short-term rentals, et cetera? So could you just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, just another side to the market research is really, can you even do this? So, some counties are really open to it, but, over time, what we've seen, because these rentals are competing with the hotel industry, is that it's getting more and more regulated. So for instance, in Baltimore City in 2019, they really, reduce the number of Airbnbs that there could be. So there's, a rule that it has to be, your residence. You have to be able to prove that. You can't have multiple, Airbnbs unless you have one in addition to your residence that was grandfathered. So it was, in existence and rented prior to 2018. So Baltimore City is pretty strict about it. Baltimore County, right on the other side of the line, is a lot more open. So, you're just looking at things like, getting your rental registered and all of that. So you don't want to go into Baltimore City and think that you're going to build, necessarily this Airbnb, empire of all of your own individually owned properties, because it might not be possible. So making sure, that you understand it, that the realtor that you're working with understands what the limitations are. There's another level to this too, where, let's say you're like a vacation home and it's a condo building or something like that, condos and HOAs have their own rules and regulations about whether or not you can run a short-term rental there too. And it might not be easy to determine that at face value. So you might just look and be like, oh, well, there's already short-term rentals in this condo building, I must be able to do it. It's not necessarily the case. Some condos have rules on how many of their units can be rentals. So if they're already, stacked up with rentals, they're not going to allow another one. Some, have rules like you have to own it for 6 years or something like that before you actually can rent it out. So it's really, you got to do, your due diligence. You have to do some digging for information before you, jump into this, because you don't want to end up buying a property and then you can't actually use it for the purpose that you were hoping for.
Just a minor detail in the grand plan.
Yeah.
Well, I know there's so much more we can unpack, but I want to move to our final panelist. Thank you so much, Diana. And we had some questions pop and we're going to come back to. So coming up here, we have Maura Sedgwick, who is an Airbnb hospitality consultant and a remote host. There's actually a lot of titles for what she does. I'm going to have her explain it better. And Diana and Maura actually helped some past clients of ours launch their first Airbnb property in Baltimore City, which has been incredibly successful. Another one came after that. So this whole just sort of organic development of our little network is kind of just a little backstory here. And Maura has an incredible pedigree in the world of hospitality. I'm not going to butcher it, so I'm going to have her explain that herself. And she has a really unique perspective about how to do this and duplicate success for investors. So Maura, welcome to the panel. And you are up.
Wow, thanks, Tina. And like Tina said, I do have a background in hospitality. I went to culinary school very early on, right after high school, and my world has just been in high-end restaurants, food and wine events, and most recently, I just left my job as the director of the James Beard Awards, which if you're in the food world, I'm no longer we. The James Beard Awards are considered to be the food awards, or excuse me, the Oscars food world. So my focus has always been a lot of attention to hospitality. What does it mean to service your guests and to always be thinking about an elevated experience? And that touches on a lot of points that Caitlyn made, creating an experience that's memorable. And truly, we are, as Airbnb investors or hosts, compete with local hotels. So if they are upping their game from a hospitality standpoint or from a design standpoint, we as Airbnb hosts and investors, owners, whichever you consider yourself to be, we also match that because we are now in their market and playing their game. So a lot in my business, I have my own Airbnbs, and then I also with investors, with folks that Diana and Tina connect me to that want to have their own Airbnbs. So I work together with different clients to create a memorable experience, really look at what the hospitality components are of an Airbnb. And just like Caitlyn said, really making sure we are able to stand out, because right now everyone thinks that they can have an Airbnb because there is success. So if you have a saturated marketplace, are you going to be the one that stands out? What are factors that differentiate your space from someone else's? And what are going to be those key elements that are going to not only draw guests in, but end up booking with you? So I focus on a lot of that, from seeing hospitality in the photos to experiencing the hospitality in person and following up with communication along the entire journey.
Perfect. So thank you for kind of like painting that picture. So your business is called A Chalet Collective. I'm actually going to drop the link to your Instagram in the chat box so everyone can connect with you as well. So there were questions rolling in of like, who could manage my Airbnb for me? So can you just paint a little bit more of a picture of what you do as the remote manager for properties? And I just want to acknowledge, I think your internet is a little fuzzy. I don't know if there's anything you can do, but just throwing that out there. We're having a little, video off might even work better, which would be a bummer, but let's see how it goes. I'll let you know if it cuts out again.
Okay, I just closed a bunch of windows. Is it better?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow, okay, great, perfect. I'm also in the Poconos where we have beautiful lakes and trees, but not really strong internet. So, so the question is, how can you repeat the question? Because now that I was focusing.
Absolutely. Sorry, I totally threw you off. Let me ask you a question and then give you feedback about your internet. So I was saying, can you just explain, like, you're a remote host, like what is that? So for the people who are like, who can I hire to do this for me? Because clearly I'm not going to do this myself. Explain that for them.
Yes, so a remote host is someone who is your communications hub, and that's really what I consider that I host as a hospitality manager. I don't really consider myself a property manager because I don't know how to fix a toilet, but I know how to contact the person who will fix the toilet. So I call myself a hospitality manager. And just walking that back a bit, going back to the idea of being a communications hub, you have to make sure, I make sure in my business that whichever property I'm engaging with, I have the ability to have a boots on the ground team that can execute, that can be the people I am going to if there's an emergency, when the cleans need to happen. And something that's unique that my business does is we offer inspections. And that means between the cleaners and the guests, we're having a separate person come in and inspect the property to ensure that it is guest ready and that nothing is left behind. So that's the model that I set up no matter where the property is, but having that boots on the ground team is incredibly crucial for the remote management. And as long as you are tapped in with your systems and that communication piece with those teams, you're able to do this from wherever. So I've worked with properties in Maine. I'm based in New York City and the Poconos for the most part, and then I have these properties in Baltimore. So even here in the Poconos, I have properties that are not super close. They're about an hour away, and that requires a different set of cleaners, a different inspector. And having that crew, again, is incredibly crucial, but I serve as that communications hub. So from the moment I engage with a client, we will set up their entire Airbnb process and systems. We'll make which shows specific details and photos of what property looks like for each guest. And from there, we also communicate with the guests. So any inquiries part of, hey, is this property that I should book for my vacation, to following up after the review, thanking them and inviting them back and getting them to engage in possibly another property, or just coming back to book with you directly to get a discount.
Perfect. Okay. So thank you for explaining all of that. And for people like me, just the idea of having a remote host who can help take a load off, I'm like, this sounds like a good thing for me. So for anyone who's watching and you're wondering, how could I leverage some of this and not, be responsible for figuring everything out myself, especially as a newbie, obviously you and a company like yours is a really great option. Part of what I wanted to unpack is a little bit of the nuts and bolts. So for anyone who's totally new to this world, let's assume they've worked with a great realtor like Caitlyn or Diana. They've acquired a suitable property. They've kind of done the front end of what we've already covered here. They've acquired the property. This is often where you step in. Can you just paint a picture of what the process looks like from acquisition to those beautiful numbers that Caitlyn gave us a screenshot of?
Of course. So from the onset, we talk about what sort of property the owners want to be. And I think Diana touched on this earlier. It's similar to my question. I always ask, what hotel brand do you see yourself as? And lots of people aren't really considering that. But again, we are in direct competition with those hotels. So it is important to think about that brand and what that is. So if you're thinking, I'm going to be a autograph collection from Marriott, then that's a whole different mentality and checklist of items and products we're going to supply. But if you think you're a Motel 6, then I'm probably not the person to work with. But also, you might have a more difficult time attracting the sort of guests that you like as well. So that's where we start. We start out with a brand identity and what we're actually looking to achieve. And then we work backwards from there. We'll look at the property and see what it needs. Is it a complete renovation? Is it maybe just a bathroom here or there that needs a renovation? Is it just a complete change of the color story where we have to change up some of the rooms to make them pop? But at a minimum, we do come through and do a touch up. And that includes maybe we're changing doorknobs, we're definitely changing the overhead lighting. We don't do any of the boob lights. So we're doing things that look interesting, again, that will appeal to lots of different guests and make it stand out. Because again, like Caitlyn said, we're looking to provide an experience that takes them out of their home. So maybe they have a home with lots of standard lighting. We want to provide something that pops. So we identify what those elements are, and then we come together with a budget that reflects the type of brand we're trying to emulate, and then the different components that we'll have in the home. And also around what is your theme, what is your style? Are you going to let me do all the design or do you have something that you have in mind and want to see come to life? So we work that out as well. So that's the first step, which is really the design aspect and what needs to be done to the property to elevate it. Then the second is the rent ready prep stage. So that's where we're setting up all of the back-end systems, where we're ordering your consumables, we're setting up your PAR spreadsheets and your workbooks online. So my owners always have access to all of our back-end systems. And then we're also setting up the listing itself. We use a product for dynamic pricing. We don't use Airbnb, we use Price Labs. So we're setting that up and we're integrating it. And we're also looking at how to automate our responses to still make them unique and hospitality forward, but we're essentially creating and crafting something specific to the property itself. Once all that's done, the property's ready, we take photos and then we go live with your property and we have the listing available for people to book on Airbnb. And I left out one more crucial step that we do as well, is we ensure an audit. So whether it's myself or another team member or a business colleague that did not work on the property, we'll have them stay at the property to just, a 1 or 2 night stay to give feedback on what's missing, what did we forget? Because oftentimes we are so close to the project that maybe I did forget to add in that extra USB port next to the bed, which for me is really huge to have. So we ensure all these different checkpoints so that once you go live, we are now focused on how to communicate with the guests, how to answer questions. We create a welcome book for our guests that not only has the details of the home, the neighborhood, what's available for tourist attractions and restaurants. So we're trying to be, again, like a hotel, providing very detailed concierge-like service for anyone who is inquiring and staying, and then we also want to get them back again. So that's like the whole 3-step process.
That's all. Yeah, it's good. I'm just glad this is being recorded. I want to just give a little PSA. I want to honor, we said this would be about an hour. I had a feeling we would run long. We're definitely going to run long. Hopefully our live viewers can stay, but if you have to go, the recording is going to be disseminated for everybody. So please don't stress, but there's just too much good stuff for us to skip over here. So we're just going to keep rolling. And a question came into the chat box that was actually the next piece that we're going to springboard into. So when we were having our prep conversation for today, we were talking about the upfront cost, which was eye-opening for me to really think through how many different facets there are to it. And you kind of put it in 3 buckets, or at least that's the way I heard it. There's renovating the property itself, as far as not like even staging or anything, but like property improvements, renovations. The second bucket is the actual furnishing. And the third bucket would be the consumables. So could you walk us through what typical costs? I know there's a wide range, but could you walk us through what that can look like depending on the size and caliber of the property?
Of course. And I like to start at the base of a 1-bedroom property, assuming a kitchen, a living room, a bathroom, a bedroom, not assuming a dining space, not assuming an outdoor space, not assuming a half bath. So just a very basic 1-bedroom to furnish and outfit with the type of quality products that we like to use, from bedding to sheets to furniture, it would take about $10,000 just as that base. And as you add additional rooms or spaces, so say you do have an outdoor space, say you do have a half bath, say you have an extra long hallway, a bonus space, whatever that is, it's generally $2,500 to $5,000 per room / space. And again, that number would go up if someone came to me and said they wanted to reflect the Four Seasons brand as their own. We would obviously look at securing different products that were a little bit more high end. And we do have clients that want that. But generally speaking, we're in that $10,000 range for a 1-bedroom.
And I think what's interesting about this is, you know, even like flipping a property myself last year, these numbers might sound really high, but what happens is when you really go through everything, the sheets and all the little things that add up. I will say, I'm sure there are some people out there that are just amazing shoppers and DIYers and thrifters. There's a way to do it for less, but I think just kind of being aware, like on the business end, that things really will add up. And that's the staging piece. As far as the renovations, you know, you had kind of told me in the prep that just depends on the property, right? And sometimes there's
Exactly.
like an initial renovation phase depending on budget and what makes sense for the property, and then more improvements that might come later. Is there anything you want to add to those pieces?
Yeah, I think there was a piece that I wanted to add in here. As we're thinking about all of these different costs, personally, our brand, we do a mix and match of vintage furniture, pieces that have been used, and new pieces. I'm not someone who is just opening up Wayfair and buying whatever. So we are really creative with the budget, and we do make sure that we're putting the heavy quality items into the higher end of the budget. So we're ensuring that the mattresses are really great. We do have a secret one that is super affordable and get compliments on it every time. Same for couches. And we're also using our industry discounts as designers to provide a strong price point. But we're certainly always out there looking for the best prices. And now that we have had so many properties over time, we actually know which pieces are going to be worth the investment. So we know exactly which sheets to get that will withstand all of the fun things that you find after guests leave. And just know that even if you do have to replace them, you're not going to die and you're not going to freak out. But we know that over time. So we've done that whole testing so our clients don't have to. So we are very cost conscious. And one thing that's important is this upfront cost is there, but we find that it lasts 5 to 8 years in terms of the quality of the products lasting. You only have to do this upfront cost once, and then maybe strategically through your years renting, you pick a few pieces that you want to highlight. And so, for example, with our client in Baltimore, the original one that Diana and Tina helped with, they've gone through a few different phases. So phase 1 is like, make the house beautiful, let's get it up and running. Last summer, we worked on outfitting the patio and adding more art to the home. And this year, we're looking at adding a little bit more custom elevated pieces that you don't find elsewhere. So we're talking about hiring an artist to do a mural on this giant wall that they have in their patio. So you can always layer things on. You don't have to have everything all together all at once, but we do ensure that what you do have is going to make you stand out in the marketplace and garner those 5-star reviews.
I don't know why, just hearing about the mural, I'm like, yes, it's like, there's something about Airbnb properties you and I talked about too, where, I mean, on the creative side, it's like you can take these risks and do unique things that maybe you wouldn't do in the house you live in.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of potential. Just to touch on the consumables piece, like
Yes.
again, that was like a little thing that you pointed out that you told me, like cleaning products, the coffee, if you're putting out chocolate like Caitlyn, is there a typical budget like on a monthly or annual basis for consumables that you're seeing, or does it really vary as well?
Great question. We also stack things at the beginning and get large quantities. And I think even for that home that we did in Baltimore, which was October 2020, I think we haven't run out of a lot of things. So you can see that if you buy smart at the beginning, it will last you. And for a 2-bedroom, 2.5 home with a dining room, kitchen, outdoor space, I think we started initially at the $2,500 to do all of the consumables. So for this property, that does include different types of coffee, tea, we outfit a very basic spice cabinet and oils and things in the kitchen. I mean, my background, like I said, I'm a trained chef, so I can't, I have to make sure that the kitchen has all these details, but nothing crazy. So we do replace, I want to say 3 to 4 times a year. It's not even something that's monthly, again, because we know how to buy at volume discounts and we know what to get. So it ensures the quality of the goods that we're getting. So I would say 3 to 4 times a year we're re-upping on supplies.
Great.
And maybe
There's so much.
it's a couple hundred, 500. It's not that much,
Okay.
the upkeep, once you have a good base at the beginning. But again, that base is what is important because of the upfront cost. You just bought a property, you have so much cash going out. It will come back to you. You just have to be patient.
Yeah. And it's funny, we're going to touch on that shortly. So we're going to come back to how do you recoup all this money? But first, let's talk about more of the outflow. So we've talked about kind of standing up the property and those 3 aspects. Then you've set up the property. There are some ongoing costs. There's the Airbnb platform, a hospitality manager like you, if you're not doing that yourself, cleaning, inspecting in between visitors, if you choose to do that, the consumables and repairs and upgrades. We've already kind of touched on that a little bit. Could you walk us through some of the key costs, starting with the Airbnb fee? If there's anything you want to layer on top to what Caitlyn already mentioned about the 3% of the earnings.
Yeah, I think it all depends on what type of software and integrations you're looking to have. We rely a lot on tech. So we have a very specific protocol when it comes to elements of the home that allow us to do the remote hosting safely and ensure that your home is monitored. So we have a whole tech budget for a Ring alarm system, for cameras, depending on the property, how many there are and where they are. That's a little bit of a variable. And then we have noise monitoring software, and all of these things have subscription costs as well as an upfront cost of buying the actual product itself. And then something I'm using in my own properties is a device that allows you to log onto the internet as if you were at Starbucks. So any guest has to add in their email address. And again, that's just a way for us to capture our guests' information, because when you're booking through any platform, we're only getting one email. On Airbnb, they don't even give us the email. We have to ask for it. So we're often only getting the one email of the person who booked the property. So it's buying those different internet pieces. And then of course you have all of the fun tech stuff that you would have, normally, like a TV and whatnot. But specific to hosting, we do rely on those tech pieces to ensure that the property is running as we'd like, and also that our guests are adhering to the rules that we have for the property.
Got it. Yeah, that's a whole nother layer to it. And then it's interesting too, capturing the emails, and it's like making these upfront investments to be able to communicate and follow up and retain guests and have people come back. So again, it all weaves together. So the next big piece is management fees. So you were so helpful in walking me through this in our prep that typically with a lot of vacation rentals, as opposed to like sometimes with like regular property management, it's like a set monthly fee or a percentage. Vacation rentals, short-term rentals tend to work in this revenue sharing model. So can you just walk us through a little bit how you work and anything as it relates to other managers, just to kind of educate the audience in a general way?
Of course. So the way my business works, we have 2 models to offer. One is essentially we are there as your coach, as training wheels. So at the beginning, we are setting up all the systems, we're doing all the communication so that you can learn. And maybe it's a limited engagement from 3 months to 6 months, or maybe you always want to have us engaged and you are keeping us on to ensure that if any problem comes up, we are there for you to walk you through that. So then there's another one, which is just you are entirely hands off and we manage everything. And for us, that ranges from 20 to 30% of the take home cost of the rental. So that does not include cleaning fees, or we include the inspection fee in the cleaning fee. So that's offset for the guests. But the take home is what we take a percentage of.
Yes, it's really a partnership, which makes a lot of sense, especially when you see how much goes into the monitoring and all the things that you're doing behind the scenes, a lot of which your clients might not even realize that you're doing, which is part of providing such a great experience with what you do. So, and I had asked you because I was curious, whenever I stay in Hilton Head, almost everything is managed by Vacasa, which is like a huge company. So they tend to work on a similar model, but it's like that big box versus like the small personalized service of what someone like you would do.
Exactly.
So I don't know if there's anything you want to like touch on, but I just thought it was interesting that if you're going to do this, you really want to think through carefully who is managing the property for you, who your point of contact is going to be, and what that customer service experience is like for you as the investor.
Right. And I think that that is right. It's all about customer service. And it's also important to point out that the percentage depends on the market as well. So I've heard in places like Hilton Head and other parts of just, Florida that are very vacation heavy, these management companies, whether they are large or small, are taking about 50% of the take home. And that's significant for sure. But I think, again, everything depends on what the owner wants. I believe that the right fit is more of a mentality and a chemistry between the owner, the investor, and who you're working with as either a management company, hospitality company. My services are very boutique and very targeted and tailored owner. And we like to offer ourselves as much as possible, if that is, ensuring regular visits to our different properties, whether they are anywhere from Maine to Massachusetts, Baltimore, Poconos, whatever that is. We are going into the space. We're staying there frequently. I'm not saying like once a week by any means, but at least quarterly, we stay in the space to ensure those things that come up are still running and still working. And we're not just having incredible turnover. We are having that high touch point of hospitality, which is why for us, the inspector is really a key point. We want to make sure that the house is perfect for our incoming guests. So I think it's all about what works best for you. Do you want this company that is more turnkey, or do you want someone who's going to work with you from a stylistic ethos standpoint?
Thank you so much. So I think like, just to kind of recap, there's the Caitlyn approach of managing yourself. There's the approach of hiring a firm to do it for you. And obviously there's the cost benefit. You really want to evaluate how much time you have, expertise, energy, and what's going to be right for you. So I would just encourage everyone who watches this to sit with that a little bit and maybe, research and do some interviewing to figure out what the right fit will be for you. So I want to jump to the income side of things. So we've talked about the expenses. Caitlyn was so kind to share, her direct net from her property. You had told me, I was like, well, how much can somebody make from an Airbnb? And you were like, well, Tina, it really depends on the property. So you gave the example of this like log cabin, that's this like total luxury property versus something different. Could you at least just paint a picture of how somebody could like pro forma this and figure out what they, likely could net, and how long until they start to make money after all the upfront investing that we talked about today?
Absolutely. So we recommend figuring out what it costs to run your property for one day. So that is literally this spreadsheet that we have with all these formulas, and we paid for this. I didn't come up with it, just to be clear. But we have this spreadsheet that literally takes into account the cost of everything. And sure, you make a little bit of an assumption on how much shampoo someone is going to use, but you can add in all these different price points and then figure out what it takes to run your property for one day. And from there, your base, that you have to charge up from there. So you can do more than just break even. So for a lot of different properties, it depends on what your amenities are. If you're going to be giving out custom local chocolate, which Caitlyn probably does, or you're doing Mr. Good Bar or something like that. So you have to figure out what that is and how it's going to affect your bottom line. You also have these things like what you paid for the house, that comes into play too. We factor in the mortgage if there is one, and all these different amenities too that we're talking about, from streaming services to the tech pieces, we figure that out. So we price up from there. And for me, my personal strategy is to have a higher price with less bookings, because it's less wear and tear on the property itself, less upkeep. And we're getting, maybe not as high of an occupancy rate, but we are getting high revenue.
Love it. And so I love that we've had like a lot of different thought processes thrown out today. So it's also kind of figuring out like what your sensibilities are. And again, if you've invested in, for example, really high quality furnishings, what you're saying, it just makes total sense to me as far as the wear and tear. And one thing you said to me in the prep was it takes money to make money, which,
Yes.
you know, which is like, duh. But like, yeah, I mean, I think it's really, you know, laid out today, like what that looks like. And yet the opportunity is huge. You had mentioned to me, as far as like the upfront investment, aside from, you know, the actual properties, like the marketing side of things, is there anything you want to touch on as far as what helps get people in the door from the marketing side?
Great question. I think so many things, but I'm going to speak from personal experience on this one. My original OG property, it's called Sedgwick Chalet. And if you want to pop that into the chat on Instagram, it's Sedgwick_Chalet. And that's my own property. It's a very unique gingerbread house in the Poconos. And one thing that's made a huge difference is hiring, and this is the silliest thing ever, cabin influencers to literally come and not only take photos and content, but to then promote it on their channels and get those followers. And every time they post a picture of my property, I get a bump not only in followers, but I have a way for you to send an inquiry to me on Instagram. So we're getting a bump every time. So of course, the social media aspect is super important. I do not do it well whatsoever. And I'm actually in talks to get a company to manage that for me. But it is something that can really elevate your space or not your space, but your base. And that a few things have come from this. For me, I get a lot of product opportunities. Like I get a lot of free things for the Airbnb sent to me that are just elevating the experience. Like, I don't know, this high-end line of a hair dryer, straightener situation, air purifiers. So if people are seeing you online, Airbnb themselves has done 2 promotions with me based on the following of my house. And it's just such a crazy world out there, Instagram. But I think that that's the greatest part of marketing. But dialing it back, if you're not someone who's big on Instagram, which I don't love Instagram that much, but dialing it back to think about the creative language around how you're promoting your property in your Airbnb listing, that is the most basic marketing that you have to have, and you have to utilize those key terms. So you're coming up in searches, you're standing out, you're really communicating what the space is. So that is your first base level of marketing. And then next, when you're collecting all of this information, all this data, all these emails, you are growing your email base. And if you are working with a collective like ours, again, we are small and boutique, we can have the offering of all these different homes, and we can market them to folks. Like, say someone is looking for a home in such and such weekend, the one they wanted isn't available, but I could market another one to them. Or, you know, you're just having regular communications with folks so you can update them all on maybe there's a new property to the collective that you want to share in your marketing email communication, or, you know, updates. For example, like the mural going into the Baltimore home will be a really exciting addition to communicate to our guests from a marketing standpoint.
I love it. I'm sorry. I'm just still dying over this concept of cabin influencers. So thank you for that.
It's wild. They all wear plaid. They have to wear plaid. That's the prerequisite.
Oh gosh, too good. And it's funny what you said too about like well-written descriptions. There was a client of mine screenshot this horrible property description to me the other day. It was typo written. They referred to the property as maliciously maintained. I think they meant meticulously.
Wow.
But it's the basics, right? Of like, but taking the time to write a really awesome description versus something that's, you know, not good, or even just like not super thoughtful. I think it's the intention that's put into all of this. So
that's right.
We're going to open up to Q&A, but you did just touch on, like, I'm going to give you just one last little bit that like one of your gifts is these really special visual touches and experiential elements. You've already touched on it with the murals, but you mentioned a couple other really neat things. So just to kind of throw out there and end for everybody on like an inspirational note of the creativity, can you say a little bit more about some other things that you're doing or you're going to be doing in properties that create that pop online and in person when they're at the property?
Absolutely. So we focus a lot on creating vignettes. So you're not just coming into a living room, but there's a component of that living room that draws you in, whether it is an Instagrammable moment or something that really captures your attention from a piece that's unique that you want to look at, whatever that is. We're also trying to create mini experiential pieces in these vignettes as well. So we're doing interactive hot chocolate bars, which I know sounds silly, but it's truly just like a few different types of hot chocolates with some different types of marshmallows. People love this, and that's what's showing up on Instagram when they are taking photos of the property. We have one whose theme is camp. So there's a whole arts and crafts vignette, but it's very specific to camp. So you can make friendship bracelets. There's a whole handmade instructional sign about how to make friendship bracelets. So we're looking at what stands out with the theme of the place and creating a vignette and a small experience to draw you into that one little piece. So it's not just like you're coming into a room. And I think that goes hand in hand with this idea with the hand painted wallpaper and murals that we're really putting forward now, is how can we draw you into something super cool and unique that makes you feel something different and feel something special. And Caitlyn touched on that earlier. And that is what actually makes you stand out.
I just love it. It's like, I hear these things and I'm like, I want to go be there, especially, I feel like just creating unique experiences where I've never stayed anywhere where anything like that has even happened, or even like coming into a hotel room and all the lights are off and turning them on. Like, I just think like the little things I heard today that like Caitlyn mentioned. So thank you everybody for everything that you have shared. I want to just acknowledge, I put one more thing in the chat box. There was a really great podcast that Maura shared with me on specifically, what was it called? Elevating your short-term rental with high vibe design was the title. So I put that link there. It's an hour long. It really inspired me and got me even more excited on a personal level about doing this and helping other people do it. So I know we've run a fair bit over. Laura has been capturing all the questions, and I actually just asked if she'd be willing to come on, and we're just going to boil it down to the top like 2 or 3 questions for the panelists that haven't been acknowledged yet. So Laura, thank you. And what do we need to cover that hasn't come up already that everyone wants to know about?
Mostly everything was answered, but something that did come up a few times that we'd like to hear from whoever wants to speak is about how do you keep your guests safe? What do you do for, security, and how do you kind of eliminate things from getting stolen? Sure, go ahead, Maura.
I'll just chime in on this. I have at my own properties a full bar, and everyone is like, how can you leave that out? Blah, blah, blah. My mentality, I think, is what keeps things kosher. I think that whatever's used, people are going to replace. I have tons of different vintage knickknacks in all of my properties, and no one ever takes them because I trust that the universe has my back on this, which sounds a little bit crazy, but I think it is a need that allows you to be safe. But on top of this, from a back end standpoint, we do have a rental agreement and we let folks know that there are cameras, that they're there, what we expect behavior wise. And I do think that that sets the tone, but also I'm trusting that these people are just best.
Do all of you have cameras? Is that what's recommended then?
I actually don't have a camera because right now it's in my own home, but it's not a bad idea. But I will say one of the main concerns that came up was, oh my gosh, you're going to have creepy people in your house. Are you worried about them like coming up? You have kids, for goodness sake. Like, people were literally concerned. And again, I think it's just like Airbnb people are not murderers. I don't know how to say it. Like, they're like a different type of people, I guess. And so I'm not concerned, but we do have locks and we have the keypad so that they can get into the home themselves. But I think cameras might be something down the road since we're going to have multiple things going on. So honestly, I'm learning as I go and seeing, do we need this? Let's see if we need it. And then trusting people. And I will say that Airbnb has a really great insurance policy. They won't cover things that are stolen, but they will cover things that really well and quickly. They'll cover things that are damaged or something like that. So that helps with like peace of mind with stuff getting broken, especially when you've invested a good bit in it.
Oh, Caitlyn, it's funny that you just said that because I got a direct message from Anna asking, what does the insurance look like for this? Is that something you're paying for extra, or is that part of the Airbnb platform and the fees?
That's part of the platform. And I think that's part of what we heard a story from our good friends who have been Airbnb for a while. That's part of why we wanted to go with Airbnb, because they just offer so much, and for a 3% service fee and to be able to track things so well, it's, at least in our area, at 3%, it's worth it to me. And then if I love the idea more of capturing emails so that you can get more people and on your own platform essentially as well.
Yeah, I also use Proper Insurance, which is a short-term rental specific insurance policy that for me, I do a lot of direct bookings just to save my renters money and just to forego that 3% fee. So with that, I don't have to rely on Airbnb at all rather, but their breakage policy is fabulous. And I have used it with guests when something is broken, but it's really important to know what your insurance coverage is for your home policy, because if you are renting out as a short-term rental, it can actually negate your homeowner's policy. So be really careful there. And it's another place to do your due diligence. And there are specific companies like Proper, and some of my other clients have State Farm. But for me as the host, I tell my owners they have to secure a very specific type of insurance, one that also covers me and my company.
Awesome. Thank you. Diana, I think you'd be a good one to answer this question. And I know it's a little broad, but if you can kind of maybe set the people in the right direction. There were still a few questions about kind of like those rules and regulations that you tapped in there, wondering like, does Airbnb help? Like, is there a maximum amount that people can stay? Because they heard of people like becoming squatters. Like, how does one start to learn about the rules and regulations, or who do they lean on so that they can do their research?
Yeah, so in terms of like local rules and regulations, it's going to vary by the jurisdiction. So for instance, in Baltimore County and Baltimore City, so Baltimore City, you have to have like a registration and all of that. And part of the legislation requires that the platforms actually collect this registration information. So you can't even put a property on Airbnb unless you've gone through what's required in Baltimore City in order to set up a legal short-term rental. But in other counties, they'll have rules and regulations, but part of the legislation doesn't require that it's handled by the platform as well. So there's not that extra level of oversight. It doesn't mean that you are not at the mercy of that legislation. So, as an owner, you should always be completely in the know as to, what's going on and what you have to abide by, because you can't always just rely on Airbnb. If the platform's required, it will be there, but it's not always the case.
Do you know, you give them, go ahead, Tina.
Oh no, I was going to say like my realtor brain is like, okay, so I guess at a minimum, it's like, obviously if there's HOA and condo rules, you need to read those with a fine tooth comb, which most people don't do. It's mind numbing, but you've got to do that. And then you want to check on the city or county, or maybe even like town, like regulations at the local level, probably not the state level, but I'm not sure. I'm just sort of spitballing here.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything that's at the state level. I don't know if any of the other panelists are, but it's usually all county or city. It's at a smaller level that it's dictated.
Perfect. Helpful. And then I think the last question was really about like, how does it really look like with your cleaning inspection process? Like people are checking in and checking out. Is there anyone that can kind of give an insight on how that looks, or systems or processes?
Do you want me to take that, Caitlin, or would you like to? So for us, we have standard in and out times. And if you as a guest are requesting a different time, it is only available 24 hours beforehand. So we have people that book and straight away say, can we check in early or check out late? I can't tell you because it's based on who's coming in and coming out, but I can tell you 24 hours ahead of time. So for the most part, we have a really tight schedule. We have different partners that we are working with. We have someone who's specifically working on that schedule, looking at all the reservations and what the cleaning team schedule is. So it's really important to keep it as tight as possible. And if we can do it, great. But I've stayed at properties where they just don't allow it at all, because it's just too difficult to keep the property going. A lot of people want to have their home available to book same day. So that means you're out at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. and the cleaners are coming in at 11:15 so that the property is available by 3 or 4 p.m. for the next guest to book, even if they book that same day. Does that help?
Perfect. Oh yeah. Super helpful. And I think we've answered pretty much all of the questions that came in. So thank you to everyone who attended. Thank you to our panelists. Just like in summary, I didn't warn any of the panelists I would be asking this, but like, is there a parting piece of advice that you would give somebody if they were, just anything you want to emphasize from today, or something if you're like starting on this Airbnb journey, a good place to start? Just parting thoughts.
I can jump in. So I think for me, it's just like, you got to do your homework. So it sounds like a great idea, and it is a great idea. It's a fantastic investment. There's a really good opportunity for return on your investment, but you got to know what to expect from the entire process and really like lay out what your expectations are for getting a return. And use resources that are out there. Like, there's a lot on the internet, obviously, but there's a lot of people, like who we have on this panel who are in it and who are doing it. So, networking with other people who are in this sphere and learning from, the mistakes that they made. So hopefully you can prevent those yourself. So I think it's a lot of front end, preparation is what I would recommend.
Thank you. And Maura, I don't know if you want to touch on this, but it sounds like that thanks for visiting podcast is a great like networking springboard. Is there anything you want to tag on with that along with your parting shot by any chance?
Yeah, I would say thanks for visiting. I don't know. They were my real estate coaches, the two women that run it. And this was a few years ago, but I talk about this in the podcast. They opened up my world to a network of people that I didn't have access to. I started my own Airbnb in 2015 and I was just doing it on my own. So I was making all of these errors and figuring things out. But this network that it brings you into allows you to talk to different folks, find out best practices, compare and contrast, and it's super helpful. And then my parting advice would be to really wrap your mind around how much money is needed up front. And if you don't have that, maybe this isn't the right investment for you. Maybe you should look into long-term rentals.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And Caitlyn, you're up. Parting thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's been great over the years to have networking, to have podcasts. I listen to podcasts all the time. I love the Thanks for Visiting, and I love listening to your podcast, Maura. It's just helpful to and I'm such a DIYer. I want to know everything about everything beforehand. But I will say for us, especially the way that we wanted to get started, because we didn't have a ton of money to jump into it and we weren't sure about the risk and things like that, I think it really helped us to start small. And even speaking of the, like, I'm on the end of the spectrum where I'm a DIYer, a thrifter. I had this in my staging inventory, for example. And yeah, I'm just a thrifty person in general. I think starting off with just the bare bones and creating the experience, having the extras that just make people want to come back and give you good reviews. And there's some things that we didn't do because we want to see if it's really needed, or should we spend this much money up front? Well, let's wait and see if people comment on things like that, or if we get bad reviews for things like we have a weird parking situation. So we're like, should we spend the money on creating it? And kind of more like your Baltimore City one. I like how you're almost elevating it in stages. Like in our bus, we're doing murals. It's going to be more of an Instagram experience. But anyway, I think if you're focused on communicating with people well, like always having like a hostess mentality, and I love the automated way to do it too. Just creating that experience and always going above and beyond in easy ways. Staging and marketing, like that listing description, I take it for granted as a listing agent. Like all that stuff is super important. If you start with the bare bones, I don't think it has to be overwhelming or super expensive. And you can kind of, because honestly, especially in certain areas like mine, you're going to stand out just by doing a few extras. And it's a good way to get started when you don't have the money to put into invest up front. You just want to be better than the ones around you.
Love it. Well, I think that's
let me say one more thing that I mentioned it on the chat box, but Stay Here on Netflix is a really great show to watch. They'd even talk about murals and spending 10% on your welcome box and snacks and things like that. So that was super helpful to speaking of networking and learning about how to elevate the experience.
Thank you. And I was going to say, I know we've like mentioned a lot of resources and links, and if anyone's watching this on the YouTube playback, we'll share all of that. And if you want to get in touch with any of our panelists, I'm going to post all the information. Feel free to search for us, seek us out, connect with us, network with us. And most importantly, thanks for visiting. Thanks for watching and learning with us. And yeah, that's it. Take care, everybody.
Yay. Thank you so much for putting
Thanks,
this together.
everyone.
Thanks, ladies, for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Laura, for coming and doing all of